Wanted to let you know that that is happening.
I would say that I am upset for sure.
For 7 seasons, millions of Americans watched the Plath family through a very specific lens. A strict, sun-bleached farm in rural Georgia. 10 children raised without soda, without television, without the internet, without so much as a school dance, all under the watchful authority of 2 parents who told their kids again and again that marriage was for life, that the outside world was dangerous, and that their way was the right way. That was the show America signed up for back in 2019. A real-life fishbowl of fundamentalist family values colliding, episode after episode, with the modern world clawing its way in through cracked open farmhouse windows. But somewhere between the wedding dresses and the driveway confrontations, between the tearful confessionals and the slow, public unraveling of a 25-year marriage, something else was sitting underneath all of it. Something the cameras never lingered on. Something none of the glossy TLC previews, none of the Next Time on Plathville teaser reels, ever prepared viewers for. Because in January of 2026, on a podcast that had nothing to do with TLC's editing room, one of the Plath daughters sat down, took a breath, and did something her family had spent almost 2 decades not doing. She talked, out loud in public, about her baby brother. About the afternoon he died in their own front yard. About a truck, a driveway, and a grief so total that an entire household simply stopped talking about it rather than face it. That is the story we are unpacking today. Not a made-for-TV scandal manufactured by producers looking for a ratings bump, though this family has certainly had plenty of those too. This is something raw. A real family tragedy that predates the show entirely, that the Plaths chose to keep almost entirely private for 18 years, and that only came into full public view this year through the words of a grown daughter finally ready to say them. Stick with us, because by the end of this video you're going to understand not just what happened to this family behind the cameras, but why the wholesome farm family persona TLC built its entire brand around may have been hiding one of the most painful, complicated grief stories reality television has ever quietly sat on top of. To understand why this revelation landed the way it did, you have to understand exactly who the Plaths are and how thoroughly TLC packaged them for public consumption. Welcome to Plathville premiered in 2019, introducing viewers to Kim and Barry Plath and their 9 children living on the show: Ethan, Hosanna, Micah, Mariah, Lydia, Isaac, Amber, Kasha, and Mercy. Kim and Barry married in July 1997 and had, in total, 10 children. Barry and Kim raised their family according to strict fundamentalist Christian principles: no sugar, extremely limited technology, homeschooling, no dating in the conventional sense, and almost no unsupervised contact with anyone outside the family's belief system. The premise of the show, from the very first episode, was the tension between that isolated upbringing and the outside world the older Plath children were increasingly being pulled toward as they became adults themselves. That tension became the engine of the entire series. Oldest son Ethan Plath became what many considered the show's central storyline early on, after he married Olivia, a woman raised in a different, notably less restrictive household, whose presence in the family visibly unsettled Kim and Barry's worldview from the beginning. According to multiple entertainment outlets covering the show's early seasons, Kim reportedly told Olivia that if she served alcohol at her wedding to Ethan, no family members would attend. A detail fans would later throw back at the family with real bitterness once other Plath children began drinking, dating quickly, and living lives dramatically different from the ones they were raised to expect. Ethan and Olivia's marriage would eventually end in divorce, a storyline that played out across multiple seasons and left Ethan, according to reporting at the time, largely estranged from his parents over how they treated his then-wife. Then there was the parental marriage itself, the bedrock the entire show was built on. In June 2022, during Season 4, Kim and Barry Plath announced they were separating after 25 years of marriage. In a statement given to People magazine, the couple said they had decided, after considerable thought, to end their marriage, describing it as not an easy decision but the right one for both of them, and pledging to co-parent their children going forward. Kim, in a confessional filmed for the show, described packing a bag and moving into one of the family's rental properties whenever it sat vacant, admitting she never expected her life to look like this. The divorce proceedings, remarkably, dragged on for years. Outlets reported the split wasn't legally finalized until August 2025, more than 3 years after the initial announcement. For a family that had built its entire identity, and arguably its entire television brand, around the idea that marriage inside their belief system was permanent and non-negotiable, watching the matriarch and patriarch's own marriage collapse in real time on camera was a gut-punch moment for longtime viewers and a genuine turning point for the family's public image. Around that same period, viewers watched several of the older Plath children break away from their parents' belief system entirely. Mariah Plath became one of the more outspoken examples, getting tattoos, publicly documenting what she described as her own path of learning curves rather than good or bad decisions, and eventually being asked to leave the family home as a teenager, according to multiple entertainment reports, without a high school diploma or GED in hand. Her brother Micah went through a similar rupture, also reportedly asked to leave home young, before eventually pursuing a modeling career that took him first to California and, more recently, to Florida. By some accounts, 4 of the Plath children became estranged from their parents at various points across the show's run, a fact that itself generated headlines given the family's original, "We do everything together" premise. It's worth pausing here on something the show never centered, but which was quietly present in the family's history the entire time. Before any of this reality TV drama, before the divorce, before the tattoos and the modeling gigs and the weddings the parents disapproved of, this family had already survived something almost unimaginable. According to family background reported by entertainment outlets, Kim and Barry's son Joshua Samuel Plath was born April 15, 2007, and died on September 19, 2008, at just 17 months old, in an accident on the family's Georgia property. For years, this was a detail known mostly to devoted fans who had done their homework on the family tree, not something the show itself dwelled on, and not something the Plaths discussed at length in public. That would change dramatically in early 2026, and that change is the centerpiece of everything we're about to walk through. The moment that reframed this entire family story for millions of viewers happened not on TLC, but on a podcast. On January 7, 2026, Lydia Plath and her husband, Zach Wise, appeared as guests on the Unplanned podcast, hosted by Matt and Abby Howard. During the conversation, host Matt Howard brought up Joshua, Lydia's younger brother who died in 2008 after Kim Plath, backing up a truck on their property, accidentally struck him. Lydia was only 4 years old at the time, and by her own account on the podcast, she was in the vehicle when it happened. She described her mother's reaction in real time, pulling over, running to her son, pulling him out from under the truck, and described how she and her younger brother Isaac, who was also in the car, ran to the house with the rest of the siblings to get a phone and call for help. She recalled telling Isaac in the moment not to look, to just get out and go. Details she said she remembers too well even now. What made this moment resonate so powerfully with audiences wasn't just the tragedy itself. Tragically, accidents like this happen to families across the country every year, and reality television has certainly covered loss before. What struck viewers was what Lydia said next, when Matt Howard asked her, point blank, how a family navigates something like that. Rather than talking about grief counseling, community support, or any of the tools families often lean on after this kind of loss, Lydia connected Joshua's death directly to a different rupture entirely, her parents' divorce. She told the hosts that she believed her difficulty processing Joshua's death had more to do with her parents' split than with the show itself, explaining that in a household that wasn't built around talking openly or being vulnerable, when the accident happened, the family simply didn't know how to talk about it. She became visibly emotional at this point in the conversation. She went on to describe what she called the hardest part of losing her brother as an adult looking back, how little he was acknowledged afterward, admitting she doesn't think she visited his grave until she was around 9 years old because, in her words, it was simply too hard to go back to. Let that sink in for a moment, because this is the actual family secret at the heart of this story. And it isn't a scandal in the traditional tabloid sense. It's something more human and, honestly, more devastating. A little boy died in this family's front yard in 2008. 3 more daughters, Amber, Kasha, and Mercy, were born after his death, meaning several of the Plath children who become recognizable faces on this show grew up never knowing a brother who came before them, in a household that, by Lydia's own account, didn't have the emotional tools to fully process what had happened to him. And for nearly 2 decades, that story sat quietly underneath everything the show presented to the public. Underneath the strict rules. Underneath the no sugar, no television household. Underneath the divorce drama, the sibling estrangements, the dating controversies. There was an unspoken grief the family had never publicly worked through, and it took Lydia, often characterized by fans and even by her own family as the quiet, dutiful, non-confrontational Plath sibling, finally speaking about it on an outside podcast, completely independent of TLC's editing control, for the wider public to understand the full weight of what this family had actually been carrying. This revelation didn't exist in a vacuum either. It landed in the middle of one of the most eventful stretches in the show's history. Welcome to Plathville Season 8 premiered on March 31, 2026 on TLC, continuing to air Tuesdays at 10 p.m. Eastern with next-day streaming availability. The premiere picked up in the aftermath of Lydia and Zach's February 2025 wedding, a wedding that itself had become a flashpoint for family conflict. According to multiple entertainment reports, when Zach proposed to Lydia, several Plath family members present responded with behavior described by outlets as disruptive. Ethan reportedly lit a fire near the location where Zach planned to propose, and Micah was reported to have thrown a chair into the water and nearly knocked Zach down while roughhousing on a nearby hill. At the wedding itself, tensions escalated further when Micah and his younger brother Isaac got into a physical altercation, one that reportedly left Micah needing multiple stitches to his nose. The Season 8 premiere showed Lydia finally confronting her family collectively over their treatment of her husband, both before and during the wedding, a moment entertainment outlets described as an emotional reckoning with Lydia, long seen as the family's peacekeeper, publicly holding her parents and siblings accountable in a way fans had rarely seen from her before, running parallel to that storyline. Season 8 also picked up the fallout from Micah Plath's breakup with longtime girlfriend, Veronica Peters. According to Parade's coverage of the season, the relationship had been strained for some time by ongoing tension between Veronica and the Plath family, compounded by a physical fight between Micah and his brother Isaac by the end of Season 7. The breakup was ultimately driven by infidelity on Ma-described learning, a comment Zach later said genuinely surprised him, noting in follow-up interviews that he found it kind of ironic given how quickly he and Lydia had actually moved toward marriage. Lydia addressed the rumors directly in an Instagram post in August 2025, and Ethan reportedly apologized to the couple for the comment afterward, though, as Lydia herself has said publicly, that apology didn't fully repair the underlying strain between her husband and her brothers. That strain resurfaced again heading into the Season 8 finale, which aired June 16, 2026. In an exclusive clip shared with Parade ahead of the episode, the Plath family confronted Zach over comments he'd made criticizing choices the family made around games, television, and lifestyle habits during family gatherings, comments Zach defended as reflecting his and Lydia's own values, not moral judgment of anyone else's choices. Barry Plath, notably, pushed back on his son-in-law directly in that clip, suggesting Zach may be exerting his opinion in territory that wasn't really his place to weigh in on, and encouraging his family to let their adult children make their own choices, mistakes included, without outside commentary unless it's specifically requested. Kim similarly pointed out that no one in the family requires anyone else to participate in choices they're personally uncomfortable with, like drinking alcohol. Zach, for his part, told producers in a separate confessional that watching the family navigate its own choices, he sometimes felt they were drifting from values he associated with choosing good, a comment that itself illustrates just how far this extended blended family still has to go in fully reconciling 2 very different worldviews living under and marrying into one roof. From a media and entertainment industry standpoint, what's happening with Welcome to Plathville right now reflects a Familiar but still fascinating pattern in long-running reality television, a show initially built around one clean, marketable premise, in this case, strict fundamentalist family meets the modern world, gradually evolving, season by season, into something far messier, more layered, and arguably more emotionally honest than its original pitch ever promised. TLC has built an entire programming slate on this exact evolution, from the Duggar family's 19 kids and counting to sister wives to counting on, and industry observers have long noted that networks tend to get their longest runs and their most durable fan bases not from the initial culture clash premise, but from the slow burn human drama that follows once cameras keep rolling long enough for real-life divorce, infidelity, estrangement, grief, to catch up with the original concept. Season 8's ratings and the fact that TLC continues renewing the show, even years past its original premise's shelf life, suggests the network sees real continued value in following this family's genuine unraveling and rebuilding, rather than in manufacturing new artificial conflict. Legally, there's relatively little at stake in most of what's been reported here. This is not, based on available reporting, a story involving lawsuits, restraining orders, or criminal allegations. Joshua's death in 2008 was, according to all available reporting, treated and understood as a tragic accident, not the subject of any ongoing legal action. Where legal questions have occasionally surfaced around this family, they've centered on smaller matters, such as reporting that Kim Plath cannot legally refer to herself as a medical doctor despite training as a naturopathic practitioner, a distinction that matters for consumer protection and licensing law but has no bearing on the more serious family history at the center of this piece. Financially, the picture is more interesting. Reality television paydays for large families like the Plaths generally scale with the number of seasons and the size of the audience, and Welcome to Plathville reaching an 8th season on a major cable and streaming platform like TLC and HBO Max represents a genuinely successful, long-running commercial property. Individual family members have also built independent income streams off the show's platform. Micah Plath's modeling career, reportedly including work for a recognized fashion designer, is one clear example of a Plath sibling converting reality TV visibility into a standalone career path outside the family brand entirely. Lydia and Zach's growing podcast and interview presence, appearing on outlets like the Unplanned Podcast and the Jinger and Jeremy podcast, likewise reflects how individual family members are increasingly building personal platforms adjacent to, but independent of, the flagship show, a common trajectory for reality TV personalities looking to extend their relevance and income beyond any single series run. Publicly, reaction to this family's revelations has been sharply divided, and that division itself has become part of the story. A meaningful portion of the audience has responded to Lydia's comments about Joshua and to the broader picture of a family that enforced rigid rules while apparently struggling to emotionally process real loss internally, with genuine sympathy. Recognizing a pattern mental health professionals frequently describe in high-control family systems, where emphasis on order, obedience, and outward presentation can come at the cost of space for grief, vulnerability, and open communication. Other viewers, particularly in more skeptical fan communities, have focused their reactions on what they perceive as hypocrisy across the broader family, pointing out that parents and siblings who once enforced strict courtship, alcohol, and lifestyle rules on their children have, in many cases, abandoned those same standards themselves post-divorce, while still occasionally judging Lydia's husband, and by extension Lydia herself, for continuing to live according to the values the family originally instilled. As one fan commented publicly in response to recent episodes, it's remarkable how quickly parents and older siblings walk it back after the divorce, while Lydia remains exactly how they raised her. Media coverage of the show has, correspondingly, split along similar lines. Entertainment outlets like Parade, Screen Rant, and the Ashley's Reality Roundup have leaned into detailed, almost blow-by-blow recapping of each new development: the wedding drama, the infidelity confession, the family confrontation over Zach, treating the show with the same granular attention typically reserved for scripted prestige television. Meanwhile, outlets with more of a tabloid or reality TV watchdog bent, along with a meaningful contingent of the show's own fan base on platforms like Reddit, continue to raise pointed, often unresolved questions about how much of what airs is organic family dynamics versus produced for television conflict, a suspicion that has followed this show since its earliest seasons. When some viewers speculated that iconic emotional confrontations were exaggerated or staged for the cameras, and that family members occasionally broke their own on-camera rules, such as avoiding alcohol or soda, once cameras stopped rolling. Once Lydia's comments about Joshua began circulating beyond the original podcast episode, they spread rapidly across the platforms where this fan base lives most actively, Reddit communities like r/Welcome to Plathville, and the more unfiltered